Recently, my wife, I guess I can say this, I'm married, so no big deal. Well, we donated some old clothes. Not old, but just like stuff I didn't want to wear anymore because I had mainly the stuff I donated that had logos on it, and I'm so I'm so disenchanted with logos right now, so I don't really want any logo clothes, right? So we donated them to the Philippines, and it seemed to get to where it needed to go, and people appreciated it or whatever, and it was useful, so that's good. Not I'm not trying to make it out like I'm a hero or something because like otherwise we would have just thrown it away. So it's like only marginally more responsible than just throwing it in a landfill, right? So it's not like any great act on my part, but it made me realize, and this often happens. It gave me perspective of how like fortunate Americans are and people in developed countries and first world countries, in particular America, and how wealthy we are. Because these hand-me-down clothes are actually of use to people in the Philippines, whereas we throw away so many clothes every single year. And I'm not just talking about rich people like the Kardashians or whatever. I'm talking about just regular Americans or even poor Americans. They go through clothes too, and they just toss them. And I think that that's just indicative of a certain amount of luxury that all classes of Americans, pretty much all classes of Americans, have and don't appreciate. There's so many things we don't appreciate, like the size of our living arrangements. Like, if you ever watch YouTube or TV shows where they show what an apartment looks like in the Philippines or in Vietnam, they're super small apartments, you know? The quality of life is just so much lower than what we have here. And in a roundabout way, what I'm trying to get to is that it really disgusts me when people in this country whine about wealth disparity as if wealth disparity is the most important thing, right? The most important thing isn't whether or not you're X amount poorer than Jeff Bezos. The most important thing is your baseline objective level of wealth and level of comfort and quality of life. Do you have running water? Do you have a TV? Do you have a car? Do you have electricity? Do you have a smartphone? Do you have access to the internet? Do you have access to education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And in all regards, Americans come out so far ahead of people in other countries. I don't even need to tell you the stats. Stats like I think the average Filipino person makes like $700 a month. Three 350, something like that. People just forget that sort of stuff. They forget like there's a whole world out there, and there's not just you looking up towards you know looking up in envy towards Jeff Bezos and complaining about, well, they have this much money, and you know we should enact progressive taxes, and the rich aren't paying their fair share. And even though that may be true, maybe the rich aren't paying their fair share, but it really has no it really has very little impact on whether or not you are leading a good life in this country, the richest country on earth. Still, it's not China yet, and people take that for granted, and it's it's to our detriment because I think that this culture of envy is toxic and it makes people focus so much on quote unquote wealth disparity when wealth disparity is not the most important thing. Objective quality of life is the most important thing. It doesn't matter that so and so has a yacht, it just matters whether I have X, Y, and Z. And people lose sight of that. I don't blame them necessarily because this is a very, it's good in an evolutionary sense because imagine if human beings, by their nature, just tended to be content with what they have. That would suck. That would be bad. The human race probably wouldn't be where it is right now if people just tend to be content. They need to strive for something. And when you strive for something, what do? You look at what's available, what's possible. And what's possible is what other people have achieved, right? Like so and so is a billionaire, so I want to be a billionaire now. So and so has, you know, a 3,000 square foot house, so I want one now. 1,000 is not enough, even if 1,000 is way more than most of the world has at their disposal. But you don't think about that. Why don't be content? That's not pushing the species. That's not pushing you as an individual to achieve. The only thing that's going to push you is, let's be frank, envy. You need to want what others have. You need to want, you need to reach for a standard that others have set. And that always means looking forward, and that always means looking up. But the downside of that is that in a modern society, it's not, so and so who has a few more cows than you and one more wife. It's Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, and they have so much more wealth than you that you can't even comprehend it. Like if you had to visualize, you'd have to visualize it. Someone would have to show you like your pile of money, and then zoom out to their pile of money, and it would be like a mountain next to yours. Like that'd be the only way for you to understand how much poorer you are. You couldn't even look at the number and the zeros and understand. You would have to be shown, like in a visual way. And in that society, this sort of impulse is toxic because you can't ever reach that. You'll never reach, you'll always be dissatisfied because there's people that you see every single day that are so much more successful than you, that will achieve more than you ever will. And you can maybe go through your whole life just sort of vaguely dissatisfied with what you've achieved. Even if, in perspective, you as an American are like just being born, you're like in the top 1% or 2% wealth wise on earth. Like the average middle class American is in like the top 2% or 1%, don't quote me, but it's something like that on earth. But you're just looking at how much Elon Musk has, and you're just vaguely dissatisfied that, oh, I don't have that. I don't have this many cars. I don't have a Lambo. I don't have a glass box house in the hills of LA. I don't have all this stuff. I don't have a yacht. I look at these things too, and I sometimes think, oh man, I wish I had those things. But when I look overall and I, take a much wider view, I have so much more than other people in this world. I have, you know, a, even in the context of America, I have a fairly large house. You know, I have, in the context of the world, I have a very large house. I don't rent it. I can easily afford it. There's just all this sort of stuff that made me realize when I I gave, my hand-me-down clothing to these people in the Philippines. Our Just like so many things, our modern society, it's not a good fit for our primitive animal hindbrain. They're not a good fit with each other. It creates toxic and unhealthy dynamics, just like um, our hindbrain urges us to eat as much fat and sugar as possible because we evolved in a context where fat and sugar were scarce. So, of course, humans who crave those things had an advantage. But now, since fat and sugar are abundant, your craving for fat and sugar, it's bad for you, right? It's bad for you. So, in the same way, you're craving to achieve and always envy things and strive for a standard that's above you that you can see. It's so unhealthy in a world where you can see billionaires and you'll never be one, and you'll never even be close to one. You'll never,
or see hot women.
or yeah, or see hot women that you can never get because you're not in that class of men. You're not Leonardo DiCaprio. So stop looking at them. Start looking at, the girl in your village. But there's no more girl in your village because everybody's on Instagram. So we all see all of these hot, like the hottest women out there, but a small percentage of us can get them. We all see the lifestyle that billionaires lead, but an even smaller percentage of people can do that. It's not good. And I don't have a solution for it, but I think that maybe if people, you know,
Sex robots.
sex robots would fall solvent for sure, right? But then all that also would be the end of civilization because there'd be no more reproduction. And Elon Musk is talking about that, and we'll talk about that same topic later too. But in this case, it was just giving the charity that gave me that perspective. But it's a thing that I've talked about before. It's a thing that I've known about, so it's not like this is new to me, like an epiphany or something. But when you just go about leading your day-to-day life, you very easily forget about what day-to-day life looks like for people in the Philippines, for people in Haiti, if you want it in Venezuela, people have it a lot worse than you out there. And there's really it's really, why am I whining? Why am I feeling so envious about what a billionaire can do when I lead a darn good life? It's just a matter of perspective. And I think that if people, maybe what I'm advocating for is people, they give to charity more often. Maybe that this will afford them that sort of perspective. But I'm not sure. I think for some people maybe that wouldn't really help. But I think it would
I
be
think, yeah,
healthier if more people had this perspective, or at least had this perspective enough to check their natural impulse to strive, right? Because I don't think you can take that out of humanity. That's inside of us. But you can get some intellectual perspective about where you're sitting at.
yeah. Was that related to any of the stories, or you just wanted to?
No, no, I just wanted to just add that
Okay.
because it just happened recently and I noted it, so I just wanted to mention it. It happens every now and then that get this sort of, just I think it's
How,
just a well-needed perspective, and a lot of people don't have it, and people who don't have it, and they sort of they don't allow themselves to be grateful for what they have, and if you let that sort of attitude fester, I think that it is kind of related to some other things we talk about. I think that a lot of Marxists and leftists are a result of this, right? If you envy the rich so much, it's because you very rarely take the much needed perspective to be grateful for what you do have. And especially in this country, I'm speaking specifically in this country actually, what you do have is a lot. Now, if you actually grew up in one of these war-torn or poverty-stricken countries, I'm not necessarily telling you, it's like, oh, you should get the perspective to be grateful for whatever. It's like, no, no, some people on this earth actually were dealt a really shitty hand, and it's just I can't really say anything positive about what you have to live with. But nobody in this country, very few people in this country, I think, have that excuse. I think pretty much everybody who has no problem feeding themselves, which we know damn well that's the case for most Americans because most Americans are fat. And you can't tell me that you have any problem getting food or you're quote unquote food insecure if you're fat. Because if you're fat, by logic, by definition, you are not food insecure. I've had fat people tell me that fat people can be food insecure, which is total bullshit, by the way. You cannot be. You're fat. Okay? If you're food insecure, yeah, you'd be skinny. So I think it'd be beneficial for people to, however they do it, acquire this perspective check now and then to remind them that you've got it pretty good in this country. You can eat, you have a shelter, you have a smartphone, you have a Netflix, whatever the hell you have, right? You work a 40-hour week. You don't work like a 70-hour week. So you have it pretty good. Just be grateful. And that doesn't mean don't strive for more. Of course you can do that. And I couldn't even prevent it. It's just human nature. But you'll feel better about things if you keep things in perspective a little bit more. And for my selfish reason, I would like you to do it just because I think fewer people will be leftists and Marxists if they had this perspective. By what right does a person who has like $60,000 in student loans and, has two cars or, lives in 1,000 square feet, by what right do you have to think that you're like some sort of oppressed, destitute person? I don't think you are.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think what you said earlier is it's pretty profound. About like that complaining about wealth disparity is basically a manifestation of not being grateful for what you have.
Yeah, I
Like,
think so.
yeah, that's a pretty deep connection, I think.
Yeah. Almost everybody in this country, at least, I think, can find something to be grateful for. And, it used to be that at least during once a year during Thanksgiving, they did that, right? They tried to be grateful for, like, that's what they were instructed to do, at least. Be grateful for stuff. But I don't think they even do that now. I think they just like Thanksgiving, you just get together your family and you argue politics with them, and nobody even takes that one day a year to be grateful for what they have. And
Has
they,
Thanksgiving been taken over somehow by the woke cult? I don't know. Are they
well,
saying that
I don't think it's been taken over, but
is it yeah
their
is it
presence their presence in it is very unwelcome. You know, every Thanksgiving I read or especially when Trump was president, you'd read articles about how to suffer your racist uncle, MAGA
yeah
uncle at Thanksgiving. It's like how to suffer him. Just don't talk about politics. How about that? You're not a dummy. Come on, you know how are you? Are you a dummy? Are you an adult? I mean, an adult who's not a dummy probably would realize that if your uncle has very different politics than you and you want it to be a peaceful Thanksgiving, then maybe just don't talk politics. I mean, if you still want to, sure, go ahead, I guess. But you know that it's not going to be peaceful. You know that there's going to be an argument. So, okay, if that's what you want, then that's what you want. But, there were those articles. I'm sure the internet lives forever, so you can find them. And those probably still, we're as polarized as we've ever been, so you'll still find them. Just look them up. I'm sure this Thanksgiving you'll see them again. So that's all I wanted to say on that.